In this video, we're gonna continue our journey into making our first React app. Remember, we started from scratch. So if you wanna see the first step, go to the first video. We set up Node.js, NPM, and created the scaffolding for the application itself. In this video, we're gonna download an IDE to work, and I'll explain to you what that is, and then go over the directory structure for our current React application. So the first thing we're going to need to do is find our IDE. Now, I prefer to use Visual Studio Code because the main purpose of an IDE is to avoid having to do any of the code editing in a Notepad or Notepad type of editor, because it just doesn't integrate well with the rest of the programming environment. And with an IDE, a very good IDE will make it so that you can make a code change, you can instantly see the update, and it'll help you debug, it'll help you do everything. So that's a properly integrated development environment, and that's what we call IDE. And in my opinion, at the moment, this is the greatest one. So I am gonna go ahead and download Visual Studio Code for Windows. Should take no time at all. I'm gonna Control J to show the downloads, and then I'm gonna run it. Should also be pretty quick. I will sign my life away for the ability to write code. Okay, so yeah, sure, why not? Ooh, this is actually really helpful. Sometimes you can, when you're making changes or someone else has made changes to your files, sometimes you want to get a quick look at them. And in Visual Studio Code, one of the best things about it is that if there is a conflict, it'll show you the conflict. So you can just right click into the file with the conflict and say edit or open it with code, and then you'll see the conflict. Also helps with some different file extensions, like maybe a .env isn't registered in your system. So Windows will say, hey, I don't have an app for this. You can just open it with code because you know what it is. So those are two great reasons to do that. I'm sure there are plenty more, but let's just get started with this. Now remember, in the last video, we created the application in our C drive under the folder called dev. So we're gonna go ahead and open that folder to get started with our project. So it should be C dev, select. I trust myself, of course. Okay, let's get started. Now, this is the initial scaffolding of an application when you use the create React app npx command. It's a very simple structure. I'm gonna tell you roughly what all of these folders do and what these files do. Let's start from the bottom because otherwise the top one will not make sense. So the README is just a bunch of information that you can give whoever's going to consume this repository or this application. So in this case, they're teaching us how to get started. And as I showed you in the last video, we just do that by doing npm start. It's a good idea to have a good README whenever you make a project, and to also read the README whenever you consume a project. It'll tell you about the sloppiness level of the developers and the project itself, which honestly is a great cue, because if they don't pay attention to details in one place, they probably don't pay attention to details in many places. Or at least that's how I judge repositories that have no README packages. And let's move on to the package.json file. As we go in the courses and the videos, I'll explain to you what each of these props does in a lot more detail. But right now, a rudimentary understanding is enough. And here we can see the name of the application, the version of the application. The intention is that this will continue to go up as we make changes and publish new versions. But at the moment, we're not really publishing anything, but that's what you could use that for. The dependencies. So this is, remember we used npx in the command before, and it would allow us to run a package from the registry itself without having to install it locally. Well, when we want to do something like format a date, and we need a third-party library like moment.js, for example, we will need to install those dependencies because we want to package the application together with that third-party library and ship it all. So we are going to have to do an install. And when you do npm install, those dependencies will get added here. Next, we have the scripts, whatever. And these are basically commands that you can customize to do whatever you want them to do. It's not uncommon to see these commands grow a little bit and become a baseline pipeline. Moving files over here and deploying them to AWS and whatnot. So expect this to grow. This is the ESLint configuration. We're not going to go into that at the moment, or the browsers list. But suffice it to say, this is what will control what our application consumes, and it'll let us decide the metadata information about the project. So the package lock.json, it's basically a way to tell npm these are the versions that we last installed, and they get basically hashed. And if you aren't careful and you make an update, sometimes you may miss it if you don't update the package lock, which is one of the annoying things about npm, to be fair. One of the annoying things. And then we've got the gitignore file. The gitignore file is basically a configuration file for Git, and it's telling it to ignore these paths or folders or files. I haven't talked about Git much yet because we haven't set it up yet, but it's a very popular version control tool, and we are gonna set it up later in the process. So for now, just have that placeholder knowledge. The src folder is essentially where all of your source code will live. This project is using Webpack, so this is where Webpack is going to look for files and resources and everything it needs to assemble together into your application. So this is where we're going to be doing the bulk of the work. Now this will get bundled together and moved into a folder that you can just publish to production, and the public folder is essentially that. So if you want to see what it'll look like, you could just go ahead and look at the public folder. This is basically something that tells whoever is coming to your project, I don't want Webpack to touch these files. These may actually be built artifacts themselves. And then there's the node modules folder. Remember in the package.json we looked at the dependencies prop? Well, this is where they live. So here they get marked as, for example, download Web Vitals version 2.1.4 or higher, and then npm is going to put them in here. it should be down at the bottom. You can see this is important. So we have like 8 dependencies here, but we have way more folders in the node modules. Why is that? Well, that's because each of these packages that we're installing has dependencies of their own. So they all need to get resolved so that things can work as expected. So there's a bunch of files here that conventionally you don't want to add to version control. But again, I'll touch on that when we start working with a version control tool. We're going to use Git because it's incredible and also the most popular. Well, now it's the most popular. Web Vitals is the one I was showing you. So here's where you'll find a similar structure than the one we are using, where the src is where the code is, and the dist is essentially like public, but dist is a shorthand for distributable. This is where the official like release files go. It's a convention that most projects follow. So that should be it as far as a rundown of the directories and files and everything that got created with the Create React app. And the one last thing I want to show you is if you hit Control and the tilde, so like the key to the left of the 1 in your keyboard, you'll pull up the terminal. And this is one of the cool things about a good IDE is that you can run commands right from it. You don't have to go into a different project or different window or anything. So here we should be able to do npm start, and it'll run this command just like we did before. Oh, you definitely want to go into the right folder. So make sure that you're in the right folder, because otherwise there's going to be no package.json, which is what npm is going to look for first to see what to start. And now that I fixed the problem that I caused, it's running up again. So that's the end of the rundown of the files and the folder structure and the directory. And the next thing we're going to do is tackle our first setup problem, which is we need to move all of this to TypeScript, because JavaScript is beautiful, is a very expressive language, is my absolute favorite language, but without any compilation, safety, like type checking, it lends itself to a lot of silly errors that end up consuming a lot of time. So we're going to turn all of these app.js files and setup tests and all this stuff into TypeScript, so we can get the ball rolling a lot faster. All right, that's it.